Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the connection between sleep and flourishing in all of life. I'm Bill Gorman, and I serve as the campus pastor at Christ Community's Brookside campus.
And I'm Paul Brandis, and I serve as the campus pastor at our Shawnee campus. And this is the Form.Life podcast, where we really try to help you follow Jesus more, no matter where he takes you.
And on today's episode, we are joined by Liz Nelson, who is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and Dr. Gayln Perry, who's a pulmonologist, someone who specializes in the respiratory system. And Dr. Perry spent the last 16 years of her medical career focused exclusively around sleep medicine. So we're really excited to hear from Liz and Gayln on this really important topic.
Yeah, they did an awesome job bringing in their different angles of expertise to this vital conversation that impacts our overall well-being. And so it was a fascinating chance to sit with them, and we hope you enjoyed the podcast. Let's dive right in. Well, Dr. Perry and Liz, it is so good to have both of you joining us. Thank you for being here and for such a really vitally important conversation. We're talking about sleep today and how it impacts so many different aspects of our lives, really our overall well-being. And so thanks for joining us to really lead us in this important conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
And to begin with, I'm wondering, I like to start, if we can, even a little more personally. Both of you have different angles of expertise that you bring into this conversation, but how did you each personally come to be invested in this conversation? I'm wondering if, Gayln, we could start with you sharing a bit of your own story related to sleep.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm a pulmonologist, and a lot of pulmonologists deal with sleep. So the cardiopulmonary aspect of sleep, everybody knows about obstructive sleep apnea, and so that's kind of my link to sleep medicine. But I was also committed, to also do kind of the whole gambit of sleep, insomnia, restless legs. I mean, can you imagine asking somebody with obstructive sleep apnea to put a CPAP mask on that had insomnia, right?
Yes.
So you're really
kind of terrifying.
If you're not sleeping well anyway, and then you ask somebody to do that. So, I was really committed to doing all aspects of sleep to do it well, and so that's kind of how I got into sleep medicine. But I can also, describe a period of time in my life where I struggled with insomnia. And that really speaks into how I care for my patients. It was over 30 years ago. I was actually trying to decide whether I was going to marry my husband. And, it's a lifelong commitment, and that was a huge decision for me. And it's not uncommon for people to have a life stressor, whether it's a death in the family or a loss of a job. But for me, it was a marriage decision that created problems with sleep. And then I had a lot of insomnia. And then when you start worrying about not sleeping, it's another set of problems.
Right.
And so it becomes a vicious cycle. It can really take over your life, which it did for me. It was very traumatic. I actually knew Liz at the time, and she walked with me through that. And then what you end up doing is you do things, you change your behavior, and it perpetuates the problem even though you don't know it. And so so when I'm dealing with patients who struggle with sleep problems, specifically insomnia, one, I have sincere empathy because I've been there.
That's right.
I struggled with it for over a year. And also I have personal words of my own that I can speak into that beyond the academic medicine training, and then I can reassure them that they will get better based on my personal experience. So I think it really helps me with taking care of patients with sleep problems.
Yeah, there's something on the other side of this mountain that you're kind of stumbling up.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I'm struck by that idea of a major life event can be a triggering, can trigger something that requires, just challenge in sleeping and needing to navigate through that. So, Liz, what about you in terms of your own personal journey? And it sounds like you were there for that with Gayln, and I don't know how you came to be interested. Maybe that's part of how you came to be interested and how important and vital this conversation is. But I'm just curious for you what your own journey has been with sleep.
Well, currently, my intake as a mental health professional always includes a conversation about sleep, adjustments in life and how that interferes with sleep, and rest. What do people do to rest? Because all of that, we're holistic beings. All of that ties together with mental health. So intake always includes that. It's just Gayln has the expertise to pick that apart and clarify, which is exactly what's needed. So personally speaking, if you were to ask my kids, they would both say the same thing. What do I want on my headstone? And it is finally resting. And so this is kind of an ongoing journey in that sense, because I do know what it's like to have an extended season in my life where I couldn't function the way that I knew I could and would again later. And I think there's a real empathy as well. And Gayln walked with me through that.
Wow.
And so there's an empathy of understanding that rest is designed by God. We are designed by God to need rest.
Yes.
And so if we eliminate that or shortchange ourselves, it does show up. Our body keeps score. I mean, that's a book.
Yes.
So, but that's really true too. And so resting as a norm in a lifestyle is just as important as the 1/3 of our life we spend sleeping.
Yes.
So that's where it kind of connects.
Your personal interests kind of dovetailed with
the
conversation.
You know, I got to the point where Psalm 23, where the Good Shepherd says, I make them lie down beside still waters.
Yes.
Oh, that was exactly what happened. And when God chooses to do that, he has your full attention. So that's kind of my history as well.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if as we stay on that, because I do want to get to sleep specifics, but I'm interested in kind of zooming out a little bit. You mentioned it already, Liz, but God's design in the midst of this conversation. And I wonder if you could speak to some more thoughts that you might have about that, because I couldn't agree more that this is really woven into not only the fabric of who we are as humans, but even into the fabric of his good creation. So any insights you might offer there?
You know, I think sometimes we need permission to rest well. And if we start with God chose rest himself, the Trinity chose to rest on the seventh day. So it's not because they were tired or exhausted. They delighted, Eden, delight. They delighted over what was unfolding. Their gaze on us should bring us joy and beauty and hope and peace and calm. And so to resist a Sabbath rest is to resist those beautiful ways that our material world, we are material talking to each other, okay? Yes. We are, and technology is material world. But there is a God who speaks to us without the material world. He is in our hearts, our minds, our souls. And so to ignore those nudges, to set apart time to listen and be attentive to what he's up to and stay curious, to set aside the material world, meaning making space for those slow down, walk without earbuds, the discipline of choosing lilies over screens, the discipline of fire pits over movies, the discipline of sunsets. Those are beautiful spiritual disciplines of knowing God and others more fully. And if we can grasp the concept of God chose us to need this, he designed us to need this, then we will have hopefully an increased intimacy with Christ and with community. Yeah.
Well,
that's the beginning.
Yeah, and sleep as a part of that, right? You literally can't go without it. Yeah. I mean, certainly people have disorders in the midst of that, but it is so deeply entrenched in and create into who we are as created beings. That's just every day we have to lay our heads down on the pillows and down on our pillows. And I think we're saying something really powerful about who we are and who we are not.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that. So I think that's a powerful connecting point with kind of the broader framework of
well,
rest.
and to even broaden it further, creation, in the 7 days there's creation. So I did some searches on rest for Earth, and you get a lot of interesting websites that start popping up. But in August of 2019, the University of Massachusetts, through the BBC study, linked the abstract and study, but the nugget is that for the Earth to heal and rest, mankind as a whole, I love the way they bring this up, needs a 24-hour period every week to refrain from using up materials, from being busy, from buzzing about, and I thought, that just shouts Sabbath. Like tomorrow, the world would have a 30% less human carbon footprint, if they chose a 24-hour a week way of resting. I just nearly flipped when I stumbled upon that. And you can put that link in the...
Yeah, we will. We'll share it in the show notes.
Absolutely. So, science caught up to God once again,
That's
right?
Yeah, there's no contradictions there, only sort of beautiful synergy. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Gayln, kind of with that kind of broad framework of God's design for rest and how it catalyzes renewal and refreshment, both at a creation level, but then at a very human level where sleep's a part of that. Now, let's zoom in more to sleep specifically. I wonder, what do you see, boots on the ground? You've shared some of your own story, but then you're working very regularly with patients who are, we've talked about this framework on the Form.Life podcast of creation, fall, redemption, and new creation, the way it ought to have been, the way it is, the way it can be, and the way it will be. And you deal daily in the fall of sleep when you're with your patients. So what are you really seeing when you're boots on the ground with patients who are struggling with how their sleep has been impacted, it's broken, it's not functioning as it should be, it's greatly impacting their life? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I love the part that you brought in, the 4-chapter gospel, and thinking about what Liz just said too, and reflecting on what you said as well. We have to sleep, right? We don't have a choice. It makes me reflect on a slide that I used in the talk about if you put a plant in the sunlight, the leaves open, the flowers open, and then at night the leaves and the flowers close. But if you take that same plant and put it in a box, when the plant doesn't have access to sunlight, it still opens at the same time. The leaves and the flowers open at the same time, which is absolutely amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a God-ordained rhythm that has been created in all creation, right? And if you did that to us, if you put us in a cave and we didn't know it was sunlight outside, we would still wake up during the day and we would sleep at night. And so that rhythm is God ordained in every part of creation. And so what I do is I understand that, and I help my patients understand that, right? And I think one of the things that I like doing is helping patients understand what's going on, so they become a part of the solution, right? They can wrap their mind around why they're doing things, not just because I suggested it. It's not just a good suggestion.
Right.
There's a biological basis for that. And so we spend a lot of time talking about that. One of the things that's really important is that we need a certain amount of sleep to thrive. And there are biological differences. I mean, some people say I'm a morning lark, or some people say I'm a night owl. There is biological reasonings behind that. Some people get by with less sleep, others need more sleep. But there's typically an average that people do well around, and of course I talk about that. And what I find is most people don't realize they're not getting enough sleep. The most important, one of the things I talk about is getting enough sleep. I can't really help you because the foundation of what I do is based off of a foundation of adequate sleep. So the most common sleep disorder is actually insufficient sleep.
Sleep insufficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
So not getting enough sleep. And I think, we're a 24/7 society.
Yes.
Lights are on all the time.
That's right.
That impacts that circadian rhythm I talked about. And so convincing people how important it is to get enough sleep. So for an adult, it's around 8 hours. For an adolescent, it's around 9. And as we all know, the younger you get, the more sleep you get. And I have patients that are brought in that, toddlers are not getting naps. And so that impacts their behavior.
Yes.
And so those are some of the things that I see, that I communicate with my patients about, and hopefully will be helpful.
Yeah, can you share more about the circadian rhythm? And I'm not even sure I pronounced that correctly. I mean, I know I've...
You did a good job.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've seen it before, and it's anyway. Yeah, so can you explain a little more about that for our listeners? And I'm especially drawn to how our instant 24-hour lights always on, phones always right there, how that impacts that rhythm and just sleep in general, and kind of what you the correlations or causations you see there.
Yeah, so the circadian rhythm is driven by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, and it's called the master clock. So every cell in our body has a clock, and the master clock, it lines up with the master clock, all the cells in your body. Wow. So it's fascinating, biology, and that clock, again, wakes us up when the sun comes up and puts us to sleep at night. Everybody knows about melatonin. And so, but that clock is impacted by light. Even though the clock is on a 24-hour cycle, it's off by a few minutes.
Okay.
So in the morning when we wake up, we really should get bright light exposure, and that resets that clock. Every day resets that clock. And that's why it's important to get up every day around the same time and get bright light, sunlight exposure.
Okay.
But light can also be detrimental in the evenings, because if you have a lot of bright light in the evenings, electronics, TV, 24/7, right?
Yeah.
Then the light also is
Yes.
impactful, as it pushes your circadian rhythm later.
Okay.
And therefore you can't fall asleep. So understanding the importance of light, how important it is to set the clock during the day, but how detrimental it can be to push the clock back at night, is how we talk to our patients about that.
Yeah. Oh, that is so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, I'm aware of the kind of the two experts that I have that are coming in from different angles. So in your intakes, you have questions about sleep, but I'm sure in your practice as well, you've seen how, not just excessive phone usage or messing up our master clock, but how I'm wondering, to bring the two strands of expertise together, how you've seen the importance of mental health in this whole conversation. So I wonder how you've seen that in your practice, and then Liz, we can kick that question back over to you, because that's your area of expertise as well. But with some of your patients, how have you seen mental health challenges also impact what they're coming to you for help with around sleep?
Yeah, so example of what happened to me. So a life stressor, anxiety, anything that doesn't allow you to really abandon life when you lay down in bed. So if it's a problem at work, or it's an anxiousness about a personal relationship or finances or whatever. So anxiety really impacts sleep quality, and depression as well. So if you're depressed and you don't have any energy during the day, and you're laying around sleeping all day, and you don't have any motivation, then, oh, by the way, it's hard to sleep at night. And so you really have to address the mental health aspect and the sleep simultaneously in order for people to get better.
Yeah. And Liz, how have you seen that play out in your practice?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
So underneath that, I hold to the verse, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden.
Matthew 11.
Yes. That weary and heavy ladenness are actually the, determining factors that allow us to approach God, Jesus, for rest. That's what qualifies us to come to Him, as being weary and heavy laden. And so underneath working with clients, I do want to ask them about their work, and are they able to leave work at work? or does it bleed over into the home life, into the evening, into the weekends, into holidays? Are you taking vacation? All of that impacts their well-being holistically, and it usually shows up then in the following questions about sleep as well. So I would say work. Can we trust that when we aren't working, God still is?
Yes.
Can we let that go?
That's right.
And not be so self-sufficient or dependent on ourselves and others for rest, but see that that is available through our Creator?
Yes.
But also relationships. Like, we weren't just designed to need rest. We were designed to need community. And a lot of people are so isolated in the way that they work that it actually creates, and you need to jump in here, dynorphin in our bodies, which is a depressive instead of endorphins or dopamine. There's another way our body reacts to too much isolation away from people, community, and that is dynorphin, and that presents depressive symptoms.
Right.
And so I do talk to them, my clients, about who are you spending time with? Where's your connection? And it is amazing to me how much we don't schedule that in a way. Again, going back to rest, the best way to rest around a meal is to have others involved. We can have a 5-minute meal, or we can linger for hours in community. We can have a 15-minute walk, or we can linger for hours on a trail with another. That's rest.
Yes.
That is just the beauty of rest, doing its healing work.
Well, and setting you up for better sleep. Like,
exactly.
I'm fascinated.
All of that is.
I'm fascinated by that idea that rich community, which again we see embedded into the fabric of creation from the very beginning. God said it is not good for man to be alone, right? And so we're wired for that. But how that actually tees you up, catalyzes better sleep. That's really, really interesting.
It does. And so those questions show up in the first session. I'm asking about these ways that people live their life in order to, and Gayln, if there's anything that shows up first, it would be how they answer questions about sleep. And then the other probably being, the same beautiful hormones that create well-being can happen whether you reach for a baby or reach for a glass of wine or reach for nature. It's like what works for you? What works for you to choose in life, that which is life-giving? And that's John Ortberg's work. What is your pathway that is life-giving that we need to incorporate as a norm? And oftentimes it's like Eric Liddell. It's when he ran, he felt God's pleasure, right? But we all have those life-giving ways where we can hear God more clearly. We can sense his loving gaze, and we push that aside for busyness. Or we think we might, if I could just worry a little more, if I could obsess over something a little more, is that going to make the world more safe? I don't think so.
No.
And that's what shows up in
Well,
sleep
that's exactly
too.
right. And I want to tie kind of two ideas together here, because Gayln, you use the phrase anything that is impacting us such that we can't kind of abandon our lives, right? But when we're doing that, we're not abandoning our lives randomly off into the ether, right? We're abandoning our lives to God, who is always working, right? We're laying down and we're putting our heads on the pillow, trusting that God is still at work and he is still holding all things, and that in fact he is beyond us into tomorrow, and there are worries there, but God got there first. And so that's how we can begin to abandon our lives to a good God who is still holding all things together. I'm fascinated by this, and I'm reflecting even just on my own life. If I can share a little bit about that. My parents are visiting this week, and I let them know that I was recording this podcast, and they just both started laughing because when I was in first, second, and third grade, I had a lot of problems sleeping, manifested in a couple of different ways, where at first I just couldn't get to sleep. And then even worse was waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep. And my parents were so patient and so gracious and so kind to sort of shepherd me through that journey. They got me help with a mental health professional. So I went to a counselor when I was a child to sort of talk through some of the anxiety that I was experiencing, kind of irrational fears that were hard then and even remain elusive for me to kind of be able to explain. But my parents got a real kick out of the fact that I was leading a sleep podcast or a podcast on the topic of sleep. So all of this has been really helpful and just is causing me to reflect upon my own story and journey in this area.
Yeah.
So, and I also would love to hear, Gayln, just from your practice, and I know you, I've seen some of your work here to know you have some of these nuggets, but getting really practically for anyone listening that wants to improve their quality of sleep, what are some best practices there that you recommend that we could take away? And I think you've already begun to share some of that and some of the things we've hit on, but just even more, what practically could we all do to take some good next steps here?
Yeah, sure. So there are some practical things that are very easily put in place. We've already talked about the importance of light and how it's helpful and detrimental.
Helpful in the morning.
Helpful in the morning, detrimental at night. Yes. Consistent bedtimes and wake times.
You mentioned that,
on the weekends and the weekdays. And oftentimes we skimp during the week and we catch up on the weekends. And when that happens, we sleep late on Saturday and Sunday. And then, oh, by the way, we expect to be able to fall asleep Sunday night, even though we slept in on Sunday morning or Saturday.
And skipped church, which is it's a real problem, right?
And so you can't fall asleep on Sunday night, and you wonder why. It's because you've slept in all weekend. So being consistent with wake times and bedtimes all week long, right? And then we've talked about this too, napping during the day, especially in the evening, is very detrimental to sleep pressure, and it prevents you from falling asleep at an appropriate time at night. And then the other thing is doing nothing in bed but sleep, right? So don't lay in bed to watch TV. Don't lay in bed to read. Don't do your homework in bed. Don't work in bed. And so because the bed becomes associated with something other than sleep. And there is a psychological feedback in regards to that. And so part of some of the things that I work with people on is separating those things, especially when the bed becomes frustrated and you can't sleep. So don't do anything in bed but sleep. And then in regards to that, don't go to bed unless you're sleepy. And even if that means going to bed a little bit later, I mean, obviously we want you to get enough sleep, but don't go to bed if you're not sleepy. And a lot of people do, and then they lay there and they struggle. So those are some practical things. And obviously, I think people know this, the detrimental effect of caffeine, nicotine, alcohol. Alcohol will actually put you to sleep, but inevitably throughout the night you withdraw from alcohol and you fragment your sleep. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help.
Yeah, that's really good. What if someone is here listening and they're really deeply struggling? What would be beyond the kind of these practical steps they can take? Is there a would you say come see someone like me? Would you say maybe go see Liz, someone like Liz that's in the mental health? What are some this conversation has really prompted in me. I need a major overhaul. I need some major help. What would you recommend on that front? I'm just sensitive to someone listening that might really need some help. Yeah,
I think one thing is that people need to be encouraged to prioritize sleep.
Okay,
and I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, I'm finally
that's
decided.
Just completely missing.
Right. Okay. I have finally decided to deal with my sleep problems. And I see that across the board.
Okay.
So I would
prioritize
sleep because it impacts your immune system, it impacts your emotional margin with your family, it impacts your productivity at work, and it's extremely important. So prioritize sleep, right? And then I would say all of the things that we've talked about. Just look at yourself. Do some behavioral modifications. There's some simple things that we've recommended. If those things don't turn it around, which I have another story for you at a later time.
Yeah.
But if those don't turn things around, then I would recommend, if you have more mental health concerns, then obviously seek out Liz, or if you have sleep problems, you can sleep out somebody like me.
Okay.
So
wonderful. It's helpful. Is there anything else that you feel would be a helpful add to the conversation that we've missed, Liz? I don't know if you want to jump in with anything else.
Yeah, sure. So in the same way that we want to schedule our rest, I would say prioritize and schedule times of holistic rest prior to other priorities. Like, where are the walks? Where is nature? Where is community? Where are the sunsets? Where are the, schedule that ahead of other priorities, or it disappears. It's the first thing to disappear. I mean, if you wait until your work is all done to rest, well, that's the white flag right there, right? So schedule it ahead. And that is so contrary to how we do life, to schedule rest. And the average American does not take their full vacation.
Yes.
Could you please, put that in the calendar before everything else. Do those things that help us to prioritize and engage as a norm, rest. Mm-hmm. The intimacy and the beauty of connection with God and others is how I would define that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, prioritize and schedule it. So good.
Yeah.
Gayln, any final thoughts to add? Anything we've missed that you think is worthy of inclusion?
Yeah, so just encouraging people to implement some of the things that I recommended. So we were able to talk to a group of individuals at the church a couple of weeks ago. And literally, this was on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
On Sunday morning at church, I had a couple beeline towards me and said, "We slept so well last night." And I was shocked, right? They'd only had one night to practice, right?
That's pretty good.
The following Sunday, the same thing happened.
Wow.
Another lady came up to me and said, "I am sleeping so well." And I said, "What did you do?" I eliminated my afternoon naps. I quit reading in bed, and I went to bed a little later. And she said, "I'm sleeping amazing."
Wow.
So I want to be an encourager that you can make things better very easily. So I would encourage people to do that.
Oh, that's a great place to wrap up the conversation. We do always have kind of a final question that we ask, and we've got Liz on record already with this, but we love to ask our guests, if you could do one thing besides the awesome work that you already do. We always like to be surprised. We never know what people are going to say, but if you could have one job, do one bit of work beyond or different than what you do, what would it be? So I think, Liz, you said that you would like to be a coach. So I'll let you double down on that or amend it. For me, I love being a pastor, but I would design escape rooms. I love escape rooms. I don't know if you've ever done one of those.
I have.
I love them.
My kids love them.
I would design them because I think that's a lot of fun to see people experience the joy of figuring something like that out. But I love being a pastor. And so Liz, do you want to double down or would you want to amend?
No, I'll stay with that.
Okay,
Yep,
it was a great answer. I loved hearing that with you and Tom and Bill. And so, Gayln, what would you answer? What would you say?
Well, mine's not quite as fun. The one thing that gets me the most excited is a new book.
Okay.
And so I love to read, and I love deep conversation. And so I was reflecting, I had the privilege of meeting Os Guinness when he came to our church.
Yes.
And I was like, I just admire him so much. I would love to be an Os Guinness, right? But I don't have the brain or the intellect. But I aspire, right?
Yes.
And it's really interesting. He looked at me and he goes, "You're a doctor? I have always wanted to be a doctor. My parents were doctors in China." And so I was like, it made me realize that, he is such a person to admire, right? The practicality of being a physician and touching people's lives, I wouldn't trade that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you,
sure.
Gayln. Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and we will have a lot, everything that we referenced in the show notes as well. And so there'll be links there. And hopefully this episode was helpful in this really, really vital part of our lives.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul.